You have fallen into Event Horizon with John Michael Godier. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to help you build a website and run your business. At Event Horizon, we're often asked how we make the show with such a small group of people. The main key is learning tools that make your life easier. And when you're creating content, you want it to have a large reach. With Squarespace, creators have tools and the support needed to transform their content into a business. And if you need help, Squarespace offers email support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All customer care team members are employees in their offices and typically respond to help requests in about an hour. So take advantage of the tools Squarespace provides, like using the templates to create a site that helps you go from just creating content to earning as a business. Head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Event Horizon to save 10% of your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you.
Joining John today is fellow YouTuber Joe Scott. Joe creates new perspectives of the world and the universe on his channel Answers with Joe.
Joe Scott, welcome back to the program.
Hey, good to see you, man. Or not see you. We're just on audio.
Joe, you've been making some videos lately that cover stuff that obviously is very close to my own heart, particularly if the universe isn't actually real. Now, your recent video on that, and there'll be a link in the description below to it, give us an overview of why exactly do they think that maybe the universe is illusory?
Well, as we were talking about before we hopped in here, that was a while back for me. So let me see if my memory is still intact. I think the thing for me when I covered that, one of the main reasons I wanted to was it was kind of one of those things where it's like the scientific jargon sounds very non-scientific. So it leads to a lot of clickbait headlines and people saying that the universe isn't real and existential dread and all this stuff. When it was kind of like, actually, this is what we've been thinking all this time, but the Nobel Prize was handed out for these guys kind of proving it, and Bell's theorem and all that kind of stuff. So I think for me, that was the takeaway. It's kind of like this isn't really anything new. This is kind of what we've been saying this whole time. The idea that, quantum entanglement can affect across time and space faster than light. Where's I going with that? I'm really good at this.
Well, you know what I think about is all right.
See,
so
it froze my mind just thinking about it.
I have those moments. So think about this. You get a photon, right? And they've always told us that a photon does not experience time, the passage of time. It's emitted and absorbed. And that means that, obviously time dilation is 100% at the speed of light. So that photon doesn't experience time. Now, I wonder, does that apply to the universe itself? In other words, to the photon, is the universe not expanded and not three-dimensional? And that the reason that it experiences no time is because it still thinks it's the Big Bang and that everything is in contact. Same with entangled particles, of course, that they might not perceive any sort of three-dimensional world, leading to the question, is the three-dimensional world we perceive actually real? And that's the deep question. So in your gut feeling,
I feel like there's various levels of reality. So like if you talk about photons and particles kind of existing in probability states and without time, and those are the fundamental units of matter, maybe that's one reality. And then the sort of higher level that we're experiencing, does that get into simulation theory kind of thing? Like is this all just sort of a hologram that we're all experiencing? It does kind of lead you down some really weird places. But ultimately, when it all comes down to it, you still got to go to work tomorrow.
That's true. That's true.
You still got to be nice to people.
Well, I mean, that's a completely different area of philosophy. Is how do you run your life? Do you do what I do and try and be as positive as possible, or whatever? And all this quantum stuff doesn't really matter in that context. But at the same time, the nature, the very basic, most visceral reality of nature is that it's just weird. There's nothing stranger than quantum physics. There's nothing stranger. And you wonder how it all fits together. And the scientists do too. They can't reconcile general relativity with quantum mechanics. They're two different puzzle pieces with a missing link, so to speak. Do you think we're ever going to find that missing link?
Don't know. A question that I've asked a few times is like, is there an end to science? Is there a point where we just know everything? But it feels like to me, every single question we answer just brings up more questions. So it's almost like, it's like dark energy, right? It just kind of like just keeps creating more questions the more you look into it. there's just like this energy of questions that keep popping up.
Well, that's a good question, is that maybe it's baked into the design that you never understand all of it. And because it doesn't want you to, whatever it may be. Do you think there's an it? Do you think there is a simulator? Do you think that it's a meaningless question?
Yeah, I kind of started going down worldview / philosophy for a while. I think I moved away from it a little bit, but one of just the reality is random at the particle level. If you're not looking at it, it's not even a full real thing. It's just a probability state. I don't know. So here's the sort of corollary that I'm making. This is going to sound really circular, but I'll get back around, I promise. When people talk about like if a family member dies and then like during the night and then they wake up the next morning and they're like, I had a dream about this person and I found out that, grandma died last night. She came to me in a dream. It has to be real or something, it's got to mean something. And then it's like, well, no, when you break it all down, for one person to happen to have a dream about somebody on the very night that they die, it's a pretty low probability thing. But there's 9 billion people in the world. The chances of that happening to somebody on any given night, pretty high. So, and I feel like that's kind of true about life in general. Like just everything is random. Every little decision that you make can lead to a million different possible outcomes. And it's just, you only see it from that one position that you're in. And where I'm coming around to that is like, I feel like that's sort of baked into the nature of reality when you get down to the particle physics and stuff. And I just kind of expanded that out to life in general. So like what that means to me in a again, sort of philosophical kind of way is like, I don't pat myself on the back for my successes too much, but I also don't fall apart every time I fail at something, because everything we do is half chance and it might work out and it might not. Everything is random. Good things and bad things just kind of land randomly on people from time to time. And that can be a little bit scary because you can't really affect your destiny in some way. But at the same time, it's like, to me, it takes a little bit of pressure off. I know I'm kind of going in a weird direction for this question, but that's kind of affected how I see the world, the whole randomness thing.
The randomness is interesting, though, because it's better to have that randomness than not, and then just see yourself as a recording that's playing forward. So I sort of like the randomness myself, but I also like, life. It's fun. So that would take some of the fun out of it if you didn't have the randomness. Wouldn't you agree?
So you're not a very deterministic kind of guy?
Not really. I just don't see in personal, look, I'm an unlikely person. I somehow ended up as a YouTuber, and I'm sure this goes through your head. How? Why me? Why did it happen? Why do people watch it? And that leads me actually to pat my audience on the back, because they're the ones putting up with me. And I definitely don't like to sit there and I like to say I got lucky. That's my entire philosophy on YouTube is I got lucky.
To me is if we're just going to talk about like how we wound up on YouTube. I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to win Oscars and make movies and that kind of thing. And then I kind of just landed on YouTube because, when you make a film, it might take 6 months or even a year to even finish the script and another year to develop it. If you're super lucky and know the right people, you might get the money together and then you make it. And then if every miracle in the world happens, the film finishes and actually gets in front of an audience and then they finally watch it. And then you ask what they thought and they're like, oh, it was good. Whereas with YouTube, you can write, film, edit, distribute your content, as much as I hate that word. You can do all that in one day and people tell you right away that you suck. So it's better.
It is better. It's by far the most creative, fulfilling outlet ever that's been handed to humans, and anybody can have a go at it. Anybody can go on YouTube and post video, and people will either watch it or they won't. The democratization of what we used to see as like the film industry. Well, now it's open to a lot more people, and decent cameras are way cheaper than they used to be. Do you think you'll ever make a movie? Do you think you'll ever actually try it?
Oh, I'm always got something I'm trying to get made. Actually, I just shot a short film in November. I'm trying to shoot some more short films, kind of get a team together, a crew that we can just kind of work well together and just crank out some fun stuff. I've always done those little sketches and intro sketches and comedy bits and stuff like that. it's funny. I'm kind of almost leaning away from that a little bit more and doing more like investing a little bit into the right equipment and team and actually make it look nice. It's a certain itch that doesn't quite get scratched by YouTube. Most of the itches do, but there's a little artsy fartsy side of me that doesn't quite get expressed by sitting here and talking into a camera. So I'm trying to explore that a little bit.
Do you think that there's a future for making movies specifically for YouTube? In other words, do you think, because we basically make mini documentaries, but do you think that there might be a future for filmmakers to just release directly to YouTube with AdSense and use that as an outlet? Or do you think that movies are just too expensive to make that work?
I think a type of film for sure. They might be kind of low budget or very niche or for a specific audience or tied into a product of some kind to sort of help monetize it and whatnot. And I know, I'm a part of Nebula. I don't know how familiar you are with that service, but there's some creators on there that are starting to do feature films. And I think I think they've got a deal going with Cinemark to actually start playing things in theaters. So I think it's totally possible. Yeah.
I think it's just, I think we might be moving into that territory as Hollywood moves out of it, because it's getting, the movie industry proper it's getting hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, it's if you don't have a $1 billion, intellectual property that you can use, that's the only kind of film that's really getting made in Hollywood anymore. But there's so many more opportunities through streaming services and whatnot to get the smaller films made now. It's a whole different landscape than it was even 10 years ago. And that was the funny thing was I landed on YouTube. It was really hard for me, the artist, the filmmaker, to give myself permission to be a YouTuber. I mean, I really struggled with it. And in a lot of ways, even still, I feel like I kind of missed the mark and landed somewhere where I didn't expect to be. But at the same time, I've got some friends that work in the industry and in the film industry. And one of them, I was out there for VidCon one year. This is maybe about 5 years ago now. And he edits TV shows, like TV shows that you'd see on NBC and the big networks. And we were having dinner and I was kind of like, yeah, you're making these big TV shows and I'm doing YouTube. And he was like, no, dude. He said, what you're doing is the future. He said, what you're doing is where everything's going. So he was like kind of jealous of me. And I was like, really? And I met other people in that field too, that are just like, the fact that you've got, 1 million subscribers or however many people following you, and they're just like, that's gold. And I'm like, it doesn't feel like it a lot of times, but no, I do. Everything's kind of starting to go that way. So it's like I didn't land where I meant to, and that's another thing. Kids today don't say they want to be filmmakers. They say, well, they want to be YouTubers. So like the thing that I wanted to be when I was growing up is really, really hard to get into. And the thing that I'm doing didn't even exist when I was growing up. Couldn't even conceive of such a thing. And now all the kids want to be me. So I still got where I wanted to be, right?
Do you get recognized in public?
Are you asking?
Yeah. Have you actually had somebody walk up in an airport and say, hey, you're Joe Scott?
It happens. How regularly would I say? Well, I don't leave my house very often is the problem. I'm kind of like here always working on a new video. But I mean, it happened in Ireland. My wife and I were on vacation in Ireland and we were at Galway, which is a beautiful little town. And I don't know, it was sort of a little slightly touristy area, lots of people, lots of foot traffic, some buskers and whatnot, people, kind of on the street, kind of panhandling and stuff. And I had seen this one guy walking around and he had a skateboard with him and just kind of in the crowd. And at one point we're sitting there talking and the guy comes up and he's like, excuse me. And I turn around, I'm like, oh, this guy's going to ask for money because I'm a magnet for those guys. And he was like, are you on YouTube? And I was like, yeah. And that was totally unexpected. And it also just kind of like drove home the point that like, this is a global thing. Like people watch from all over the world. It's just that it's hard to conceptualize until you're kind of confronted with it. But I've had a few things like that. I got the drive-through guy at the Popeye's Chicken down the street. It was funny because he was, he was taking my order and he kind of looked at me and he was like, hey, has anybody ever tell you look like that Science with Joe guy? And I was like, what? He said, Science with Joe, it's a YouTube channel. And I went, you mean Answers with Joe? And he was like, dude, is that you? He starts freaking out on me. It's little moments like that. It has been happening. Yeah. And I'm still not used to it. And I feel like I walk away from those exchanges just constantly double thinking like, oh my God, did I come off okay? Was I nice? Did I, I'm always like wondering how I came off to people. I think I do okay, but it's just kind of I'm put in as weird of a position as they are, basically.
The first time it happened to me is by far my one of my favorite experiences with the whole YouTube thing. The first time I got recognized, I hear over my shoulder behind me, I hear somebody say, "Did you drive the LeBaron?" Because I make jokes that on YouTube that I drive an 85 Chrysler LeBaron when I actually don't. And that was the first time I got recognized, and I just busted up right in a hotel lobby.
And they did it with an in joke too.
That's exactly how I would want it to go. Because that's the one thing that I don't do because of the seriousness of the subject matter that I cover. I don't take myself seriously, and it's the tension breaker after you're talking to people about existential crises. You know, you got to end on a joke.
Oh, I know all about that. Yeah.
Now, what over like the last year with developments in science and all of the weird stuff that's come out, it's actually been one of the weirder years that I remember. What is your favorite weird story in science over the course of the last year?
In science, well, my videos have been leaning more toward like weird mystery stuff. Not to get away from the science things, but I fancy myself a bit of a storyteller, so I find like the mystery content kind of tag teams that pretty well. I think the one that kind of was fun to me anyway, and again, this isn't really science that much, but the Somerton Man mystery.
What's that one?
So that was like in 1947, I think it was. This guy was found dead on a beach in Australia, in Adelaide, Australia. And he's kind of like a John Doe kind of situation. And it became this whole mystery about like who he was. And there's all these theories. Of course, everybody thinks he was a spy and there's, all that kind of stuff. But they did finally this year figure out who he was. And there's a guy named Professor Derek Abbott. I actually had him on my podcast not too long ago. But he's just like an electrical engineer who just became obsessed with his story and just got the body exhumed, and they're doing DNA tests and ran it against all these databases and stuff. And Colleen Fitzpatrick from, what's the group that she's with? But she's a forensic genealogist that she got on board. And yeah, they figured out it was this guy named Carl Webb. And they're still kind of piecing together his story and like how he wound up there and everything. But this was a 74-year-old mystery that finally got solved. That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is, but I mean, there are mysteries even older than that may be solvable. Now out of mysteries, which one compels you the most that's still unsolved? What's the one that keeps you up at night?
I'm gonna say what was the guy's name? I'm blanking on it. Hang on, I may have to pull up my computer here. Peter Bergman, that was his name. The Peter Bergman mystery. So this was a guy who checked into a hotel in Ireland. What was the name of the town? Sligo town. He checked in under the name Peter Bergman. He put his address as like somewhere in Austria, but they looked into it and it was a fake address. It wasn't a real address. It wasn't his real name. But he was caught on camera. There's like all these, security cameras throughout the town. So like he was there for a weekend or maybe a full week even. And there's all these cameras like catching him walking out of the hotel with a purple bag, and then he would return without it. And they don't know if he like folded it up and put it in his jacket and it was the same bag every time, or if he had a whole bunch of different purple bags. But he was basically just going around town and getting rid of all of his personal effects and putting them in different bins and stuff. But he managed to do it outside of all the security cameras. So a lot of people are like, is he, some kind of police person? Like, how did he know to avoid all these cameras and stuff? Anyway, long story short, he was found dead on the beach. This is another dead on the beach guy. This is kind of a sad story because it turns out when they did the autopsy, he was riddled with cancer. He probably only had like 6 weeks left to live or something like that. So he took himself out, very, very sad. But he hid his identity as completely as possible, cut all the tags out of his clothes, had no ID on him. They haven't been able to figure out who he was. It's a very sad mystery, but it's also one that brings up a lot of questions about like, should we be trying to solve this? This guy clearly, his biggest last wish was to not be identified. He wanted to just slip away and disappeared. He was actually, it seems like he was trying to kind of just get washed out to sea, and it wound up not happening. The twist in it was that apparently he took some barbiturates or something when he was on the beach, but then before he could go out into the ocean and get washed away, he had a heart attack. And just freakishly weird heart attack on the beach. And so he passed away there and was found later. And it's kind of a bummer of a story, But it brings up a lot of questions about, like, do you have the right to be forgotten? What does it mean to have privacy in today's day and age, and that kind of thing? And brings up questions of end of life decisions, like should you have the right to go out the way you want to? And anyway, it gets into a lot of ethical stuff, but it's a haunting mystery, and I think that's why it sticks with me so much.
I would note, though, that there is something poetic of going out anonymously. In other words, you come in anonymously, and then they name you, and then you go out anonymously. You come in with nothing, and you go out with nothing.
Somebody else gives you a name, and you have to have that name for the rest of your life, and then you can just get rid of it.
Get rid of it and go out on your terms. So
he went out on his terms, and there is something kind of beautiful about that. Sad, but
sad but beautiful. However, it does bring up an interesting thought. Now, say somebody's got cancer or whatever, and they're going to go out on their terms, but they want to make a mystery deliberately and say, well, let's let them chew this one over, and they make a plan to actually create a mystery. Do you think anybody's ever done that?
Maybe that's what this guy did.
Yeah, you got to wonder.
Leave him something to talk about.
Yeah.
There was another one that I kind of referenced in that video. I think his name was Lyle, or the name he went by was Lyle Stevick or something like that. Same kind of deal. Sorry to get into such like dark territory here, but yeah, I think he hung himself in a hotel room using a fake name, and it was kind of a mystery for a while, and then they figured it out, and his family actually requested that they not release his real name because he clearly didn't want that to be known. So that's like another mystery that people have kind of decided to leave alone because they're abiding by his last wishes, kind of thing. So, yeah.
Now, to switch gears just a little bit.
Well, you want to get off this topic, really? Yeah.
No, ancient mysteries. And this is something that I've been researching lately, just for my own enjoyment, not really something I would make a video on it. But you did. Göbekli Tepe, the archaeological site that is just really old for what it is. What compelled you to make a video on that mystery there as to who built this and why?
Yeah, there's a couple of them that I've done on that. There's one called Chanquillo down in South America that I covered in Peru. Similar age, and I think it's got. I will talk about Göbekli Tepe. I'm not trying to change the subject, but the thing that's more interesting to me about the one in Peru is that it kind of gets into like, when did people actually come over to North America and eventually South America? It's one of many things that keep pushing back the migration theory of when people came over. Now it's thought that there's like multiple waves of people that came over from Asia. There's even some that were speculating that they might have come from South Pacific, like the Polynesians and maybe even Australian Aboriginals that maybe kind of went down across Antarctica. I mean, we've always been explorers. So it makes perfect sense that people even 10,000, maybe even 20,000 years ago, they were explorers too. And they probably got around the world a lot more than we know of. And so that's one of the things about Göbekli Tepe that's really interesting to me, is it kind of upended our idea of like the agricultural revolution being the thing that led to cities, because this was pre-agricultural revolution. It made us rethink the societies around hunter-gatherers and nomadic people. We used to think of them as just people that kind of roamed around and followed herds and stuff like that. And it turns out they had pretty complex societies and built stuff, and they weren't waiting around for corn to grow. They were already functioning that way. And that's pretty interesting. I get really interested in prehistory and ancient stuff, which is when everybody starts bringing up Graham Hancock, which is not really my jam. The fact that human beings were around for 250,000 years before we started really seeing civilizations as we understand them today, I just feel like there's a lot of room there for things to have happened that seem beyond what we think could have been possible. But it has to be supported by evidence. So that's kind of where I stop.
Yeah, me too. Pretty much a standard archaeology type person. But what amazes me about those days of exploration in the Pacific, with the populating of Pacific Islands and Australia and all that, imagine how long you would have to spend in a canoe to go those distances, and how many people throughout history got lost in the Pacific Ocean with finite supplies in a canoe. And you got to give them credit as the most gutsy of explorers, because you're heading out into the unknown looking for an island that you don't even know is there ultimately.
Ancient Polynesia stuff is fascinating to me, like how they were able to navigate across the oceans with the technology that they had in canoes, like you just said. I mean, they 100% did it, and we still aren't quite sure exactly how. Now, maybe some people know better than I do. Obviously, a lot of people know better than I do. But I actually took, just as a random elective in college, I took a anthropology of the Pacific Islands class, and the professor was like a legit, like he spent time in Papua New Guinea with the tribes and wore the penis gourd and did the whole thing. And it was just story time. We would just go into class and he would just tell us just the craziest stories about his trips over there and living there for years with the natives and stuff. And it's really fascinating. I maybe just that class sort of instilled a fascination in me ever since then.
I actually would like to go to some of those islands one of these days and actually see these people firsthand. What I wonder too is about folklore. This idea, there's a story that's in Aboriginal lore in Australia about the Pleiades, what they could say the seven sisters instead of the six, and it's because one of the stars is ambiguous; it's too close to another one. So we see them as six, but ancient peoples saw it as seven. Well, the Aboriginal Australians have this story. Then you find a variation of that story in ancient Greece, and you find another variation of that story in Central Asia, meaning that it might be a preserved folk tale from 100,000 years ago when these people were last in contact that's been preserved word of mouth that entire time. And that just blows my mind that a folk tale could be that old, but it's possible that it is. And then I also honestly cannot look at cave paintings in Europe without getting the chills. Looking at things like Chauvet Cave, where these animals, that's a human from 40,000 years ago talking to you, essentially, telling you what was important to him or her. And those are the things that really give me the shivers, because that's really as close as we can get to talking to an alien life form, because their life is so dramatically different than a human life today, at least in first world country like this. And there are still people on this world that are uncontacted, living in the Stone Age, particularly in North Sentinel Island. There's an yeah. What do you think about those groups? Do you think that can they stay isolated forever, given that we're a giant technological spacefaring civilization?
I hope they do, frankly. India, I believe, is who is patrolling North Sentinel and keeping people from being on there. I hope they maintain that policy of not letting people over there. I think that's a special little. It's funny because at the same time, like, God, what would it be like to talk to those guys and see what their perspective is and what their worldview is in their belief systems, their folklore, all that. How interesting would it be if that lined up with some of the stuff like you were just talking about, But at the same time, I like that it's a little conclave. Is that the right word?
Conclave or enclave, maybe. An enclave of human history, perhaps.
Yeah. It's that cave painting in human form.
There was an uncontacted group that contacted, right? They came out and contacted our civilization about 10 years ago. And it's interesting because they were just a small group in I think in Brazil, in the rainforest.
I think I remember this, yeah.
Yeah, and they got wiped out by poachers, and the remainder of the tribe was like, okay, we'll just go and make contact. But what was amazing is that afterwards, it was amazing to find out what they actually knew. For example, this tribe living in the Stone Age knew the difference between the Peruvian army making incursions and Brazilians. They knew more than you could have ever thought that they would, given that they had no contact. And they certainly knew who the poachers were. They also knew that deforestation and everything, they were aware of way more, which drives home the fact that humans are humans. And even if you're a primitive person painting a cave wall 40,000 years ago, you're still a human. And if you were transported to today, and you would be indistinguishable, essentially. And I find that amazing.
Talking about the cave walls, did you ever see the documentary Cave of Forgotten Dreams?
Yes, in fact, I interviewed Werner Herzog on this show.
Seriously, I didn't know that.
I did.
How cool is that? Okay, I'm super.
Yeah, he's my favorite filmmaker, and I had the opportunity to do it because he made a documentary with Dr. Clive Oppenheimer on meteorites. So I jumped right on.
Fireball,
in there,
is that what it's called?
Yep, that's correct. Yep. And so we jumped in there and I got it. So that's actually probably the biggest I've ever hit, I would think.
Oh man, that's a dream, man.
You got to say certain things. For example, coffee is the beverage of the cowards. And
My favorite is he did, well, of course, I'm a giant Parks and Rec fan, and he did that cameo where he was selling a house to
I remember that
April.
he was
Andy and
moving.
April.
He's moving to Florida to be closer to Disneyland.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that weren't, I'm going to be closer to Disney World.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. I love Parks and Rec because Ron Swanson just cracks me up. That was did that show end? I mean, or is it still being made? I don't even know.
Oh, no. It ended in 2014. So it's been almost 10 years.
See, that shows you how up
I am. You're a photon. Time doesn't.
I am a photon. Yes, I am a photon. Well, the thing is that at 47, a year goes by so fast that they all just mesh together. At least I think I'm 47. I may not be.
No, so I actually, just if we're going to nerd out on Parks and Rec, I usually like once a year, I'll watch the show, I'll binge it. And then they moved it all over to Peacock, and I was like, I am not signing up for another friggin' streaming service. And I got all mad because they're like holding my favorite show hostage. But IFC has actually been airing it. They air like 4 of them a night or something like that. So, I was recording them on my I use YouTube TV, but anyway. So yeah, I actually just finished a few days ago the last episode of that. And so like it's funny because like I'll be depressed for a few days after I'm done watching it because I just love that show so much. And it's just kind of like, it's sad when it's over. But the funny thing is, yeah, it ended in 2014 and the last season kind of jumped ahead 3 years, and it was set in 2017. So it was like set in quote unquote the future, where like everybody's cell phone was like a hologram and stuff. And it was kind of, they made a lot of like future predictions and whatnot. And I think they actually got the World Series right or something like that. Anyway, it's funny now to look back and, what was the future for them is like way in the past for us now.
So that was your favorite comedy show, or was that your favorite of all time of any show?
Oh man, it might be. I'm a giant Michael Schur fan. He was the guy that produced it. He also did The Good Place, which was somehow he took an ethics course and made a sitcom out of it. And especially when you get to the end of it, it's absolutely heartbreaking and beautiful. And it's I would call it a work of art as far as a sitcom can be considered one. But I like Parks and Rec more. It just puts me in my happy place,
It does. And the show that does that for me is Lost. If I ever just want to get if I ever want to just zonk out of everything and watch something completely crazy, I just put on an episode of Lost, because it's neither science fiction nor science. It's an escape, it's sort of like the Lord of the Rings. It's not meant to be taken as reality. And that's my escapism, because I'm always thinking in terms of sci-fi and science. So that's what I watch. What are you watching right now? I'm currently obsessed with The Mandalorian.
So they just started the new season, didn't they?
They did, yes. And it's good.
I have not caught that yet, but I did watch season 2, so I'm caught up to this new one. Yeah, I need to check that out. My wife and I are watching The Last of Us right now. That's probably the show that I'm following the most right now.
I'm also following Picard on Star Trek. That's on Paramount Plus, yeah. And well, to be honest with you, I'm not too happy with I like one Star Trek series, which is Strange New Worlds. I like Picard. I don't really like Discovery, and it's like, I'm paying per month for just 2 shows, and you start to wonder, especially when in this modern age, you got to have 10 different streaming services. We're back to cable again, and I haven't even gotten rid of cable. My internet service provider bundles it, so I'm forced to maintain cable, and I just never find anything worth watching on there. It's Graham Hancock, essentially. That's cable TV to me, is that type of stuff.
Well, I have YouTube TV, which it's basically cable. It's all the cable channels and stuff. But I mostly just watch YouTube now. And I've gotten so used to just like, I'm going to search for something and find it and watch it. And the whole like passive, just sort of sitting there and letting this thing stream stories and commercials at you. There's something, it happens so rarely that I'll just like be vegging out on the couch and just like watching something. And it's usually some old sitcom like, I don't know, Friends or something like that. It's everything feels like, tell me if you're in the same place that I am here. I feel like 90% of the TV and YouTubing that I watch is just like comfort viewing.
I would agree with that. There's a certain catharsis to YouTube channels that isn't really present with, old standard episodic television. So these cathartic sort of channels serve to help people get past anxiety or depression or whatever. And I would cite, for example, one channel that I veg out to is Feature Man, who is an old school Hollywood actor and extra, professional one. And he just cooks, makes bologna sandwiches and stuff like that. But he does it in just such a way that it has that cathartic effect. You could also cite Review Bra, doing food reviews. And normally I would not care about what somebody thinks about a Big Mac, but they do it in just a certain way that it's entertaining. And that's one of the interesting effects of YouTube, is that cathartic sort of content creation is something new, I think, that we didn't really have with television, with the possible exception of somebody like Bob Ross back in the day, where they were kind of getting into that vibe. But YouTube lets you can call it ASMR, you can call it whatever you want, but it seems like that's the sort of content that we are all really looking at YouTube for. Would you agree with that?
See, that's kind of the point that I'm making. And I wonder how much of that is just the pandemic and all the stress from, well, partly the pandemic, partly just that we live in just such information overload and outrage overload all the time. Like everybody's just always outraged about everything. And I think there's just something about sitting there watching somebody cook some noodles or something, I wind up going down a bunch of different paths. I get on these weird streaks of watching, like, well, because I'm writing all the time, I'm always writing scripts for videos. I can't really have words being spoken. It kind of throws me off. So it started with train videos. There's people who will, like conductors on trains will, or engineers, I forget what's the right term, but anyway, they'll just like set up a camera in the front of the train, and it's just 8 hours or 3 hours or so of a train going through the Swiss Alps or something. And it's gorgeous, but it's just like something to have on the TV. I kind of started there. There's also walking tours. I watch a lot of walking tours of like Tokyo and Seoul. I think I land on Asian cities because I can't read the signs. So it's like a little less distracting. I've gotten lately into like wood turning, like people putting old stumps on a lathe and making a bowl out of it and stuff. Yeah, just weird stuff like that. And I get weirdly excited about it.
Well, we all do.
But it's like a comfort thing. It's a satisfying thing.
It really is. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's next level entertainment. And it's just some of it, you just don't have to think about anything. You just put it on in the background, like the train videos. I've done that. Another thing that I like are, like webcams of cities. You just put one on and you're looking at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the town square, and, that kind of thing. So I like to do that, especially with places I've been, not so much with places I haven't been, believe it or not. Yeah, it's strange.
I did one time find a walking tour of Positano, Italy, which is where my wife and I got married. And they did walk like right past the spot where we got married. And I was like, no, look at that. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, that's what I enjoy is, remembering, having been someplace 30 years ago, or when I was a kid or something like that. And then just seeing that it's still there. There's something weirdly satisfying about it.
Direction that entertainment has gone in that I didn't see coming.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. It's neat.
It is neat. Now, one thing that I do love to watch, and I'm pretty sure you do too, nothing like a good rocket launch on YouTube. What do you think about Artemis? I will come clean and say I was in tears watching Artemis launch, that we now have a new rocket on level of Saturn V. What was your thoughts?
It didn't quite bring me to tears, but I was ready for it. It's exciting, isn't it?
It really is. And the idea that with Starship, we're going to have 2 different rocket systems that can literally go anywhere in the solar system directly. And it always made me very sad that we dropped Saturn and went with the space shuttle, not to slight the space shuttle, but it always made me sad that we've dropped that capability, because von Braun actually designed that thing to be a Mars rocket. It was overkill for the moon. And we never used it for the intended purpose. And now we've got stuff that the express intent is to eventually go to both the moon and Mars again, and human boots on Mars. 2 different launch systems to do this. So you think we're going to go to Mars? Do you think that this is actually viable?
is an exciting time to follow this stuff. There's so much going on. I feel like every time I turn around, there's a new private company that's got some crazy new idea that it's crazy, but at the same time, it's like, how has nobody done this before? My buddy Tim Dodd covered, is it Stoke Aerospace, I think is what it's called, but they've got a fully reusable system that uses aerospike engines to land with. It's a little chunky, beefy boy that the first stage comes back and lands kind of like your Falcon 9, but then the upper stage, it's got a heat shield. I forget what, it's like a super chilled or something heat shield that, now of course this has not flown yet, but it's got this heat shield that sort of deflects around the thrusters, and so it just kind of like comes in through the atmosphere and then lands vertically, and it's ready to be reused, and it's fully reusable. So Starship might not be the only fully reusable vehicle out there. That's another one. Now they're still in development, but you got Firefly Relativity almost launched the other day. I can't wait to see if they can get off the ground. Astra. There's just so much going on right now, and there's some really exciting stuff. But yeah, seeing Artemis go up in the Space Launch System after all the years and all the headaches and the budgets and all that stuff, and see it finally take off. And man, nothing kicks ass more than those solid rocket boosters. I really want to see one go up in person, because the golden years of the shuttle, just watching those things go off is just like amazing.
It really is. And they, you look at it from certain angles, the Artemis launch, they're literally detonating when they go off. When they fire those things off, they're boom, boom. And it's just, it really is amazing to see. Now, Tim Dodd, that you mentioned, he's going to the moon, isn't he?
Yeah, he got picked for that Dear Moon mission. Yeah. I knew about it maybe about 6 months before everybody else did. So I got to kind of hold that over people, but I couldn't talk about it, obviously, but he kind of let that slip to me.
I just like the idea of a YouTuber going to the moon and making content as we say it, but actually doing it from space. That's monumental, and I really wish that guy the best of luck, and I can't wait to see what he does, because he's gonna make a video. How could you not?
Well, he's got a whole van now. He's got to put that on there and fly it up there.
Well, launching motor vehicles into space is a thing. It's a thing. It's been done. Now, I wonder what, that's one thing that I ponder. I wonder what that Tesla looks like now, because I can't imagine with the sun, the raw sun exposure, that there's any organics left.
Job looks like.
But then, yeah, what the paint job looks like, I would imagine that thing is just completely trashed. But at the same time, I was always told that the flags on the moon would have been destroyed completely, but now there's some evidence that they're faded but still there. So I don't know. You never know. They're just basically white flags, but you would have expected them, given that they were bought at like Walmart or whatever they had in 1969. They weren't anything special, and they were probably cotton back then. And you would imagine that would have just disintegrated by now, but apparently it hasn't. So
I know that
I don't know.
I mean, they put up a flag for all of them, right? I mean, I'm sure they did.
Believe so. Yeah, I believe they did. Yep.
So I know the first one for Apollo 11, I don't know if they all got knocked down to the ground from the, the thrusters when it took off, but I know Apollo 11 did. So that's kind of another thing to think about, is they're just kind of like laying in the moon dust.
That's true. They very well could have been. I know that one did get blown down. I think somebody had some evidence, though, that one of them was still up and the flag was still there. I can't remember the exact circumstances of that, though.
But they're white now, so it looks like we surrendered to the moon, basically.
We have surrendered to the moon.
I mean, we've seen moonfall. We know what's going to happen.
Yeah, we know what's going to happen. Do you see a time where the moon could be industrially useful to us? In other words, like helium-3 mining or something like that. Do you think that's where we're going to go, or do you think we're just going to put a base there and treat it like Antarctica?
Well, I mean, I think, it always comes down to the economics. Like, what is up there that's valuable enough that it would be worth the expense of going up and getting it and bringing it back? If we do get fusion going, which would be amazing, the helium-3 thing obviously would be a big source of fuel. So I could see that. The answer is yes. I think we could do that. I think it's just, I'm curious what the economics of it would be. I theorized in a video a while back about the possibility of putting sunshades up at the L1 Lagrange point to, block sunlight and prevent warming. I kind of went into the the nitty gritty of that and how it would all work and everything. And of course, it's just this insane mega project. It would take like 1 million, not like 8 million launches or something like that. But if you could set up like a rail gun on the moon that could just fling them out there because there's no atmosphere to get in the way, I could see the moon maybe being sort of a launching depot for all kinds of things like that. I know that there's a lot of people that there's the whole debate about, do you go to the moon first and then Mars, or is it direct to Mars? I think both sides have their pertinent arguments, but I definitely see the value of the moon infrastructure for deep space stuff. I mean, you're already slinging around the Earth at, how fast is it going? Like 250,000 miles an hour or something? Just already have that momentum going. You can take off. You could do an electromagnetic rail gun or some kind of just launching straight from the surface thing, so you don't have to worry about the atmosphere. There's a lot of advantages to it. And if we had an actual robust, whether it's automated or if there's people down there building stuff, if you had some manufacturing infrastructure that's working in 1/6 gravity, which might make things easier to do. Of course, there's a million other things that might make it harder to do. But if you had that, I think there's a value there. Yeah. I mean, I think it's quite a ways out, but yeah.
So say we have that infrastructure, and this is my last question for you today, but would you go? Would you go to the moon? Well,
of course, when Tim got picked, everybody started asking me if I would go. I will just say Tim he has more testicles than I do. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near one of the first people to go up on any particular ship. But, if somehow 20 years from now, it was like Airplane 2, just hop on a little modified shuttle and fly out there. Just don't get William Stryker in the pilot seat. I love the idea of it, of course. But I wouldn't be one of the first ones. I'm not a pioneer, but I would love to have that experience.
I have the interesting distinction of, given that I've spent the last 6 years on YouTube pontificating about space, there is absolutely no way I am ever going to space.
Well, yeah, that factors in quite a bit too. And you know who's also like that is Andy Weir.
Yeah.
I've gotten to know him. He didn't even fly. He won't even get on an airplane, but he'll write books about traveling to other stars and stuff like that.
I think I asked him that actually.
But he's also he's like hard sci-fi. So like he really gets into the realities, the harsh realities of space travel and stuff. So yeah, I can see it. Be like, nope.
Yeah, no thanks. I will fly though. I fly all the time, but and I enjoy it actually. I sort of like commercial flights still, even though I've done it thousands of times. But no on space, no thanks. It's just the utter vacuum and blackness. It just bothers me.
Well, no, every astronaut says that. You go up there and you look out into space, and it's just like it is the ultimate void. And then you look down at Earth, and it's so beautiful, and it's like, I do think there's something to be said about the overview effect, about getting up there and seeing the Earth from afar and being like, wow, this is all we've got. This is literally all that's out here, and we need to take care of that. I think that's important. I was going to ask you though, when you're talking about flying, do you still look out the window when you're flying?
As much as I possibly can. I try to get window seats. One of the reasons that I usually fly Southwest is because of the way they seat. You pick your seat, and I always try to get window seats so that I can look out. And I have seen some amazing things. I remember flying to England sometime around 1997, and it was direct from St. Louis because TWA still existed and it was the hub. So you could get a direct flight from St. Louis to London. And I did that, but the thing is, you arc over Greenland, and I was looking down. All I saw was thousands upon thousands of icebergs. It was just the most amazing thing. And then on the flight back, which I did the same thing, I saw the Aurora Borealis night flight.
That's a bucket list thing for me. I definitely want to see the Northern Lights.
I have seen them 3 times because where I live in the Midwest, very occasionally you'll have a huge solar storm that pushes them down here, but all you see is just a red, very dim red glow in the northern sky. But there, when I was flying, it was the Northern Lights, green glow. So for me, flying offers an opportunity to study the Earth from the air. So I'm always in a window seat, and I certain things like flying to Las Vegas and flying over the desert, things like that, where you can actually see the level of the water, with the dam and how it's dropping, and you can see the mark.
Bathtub ring.
There's just too many interesting. Yeah, the bathtub ring. There's just too many interesting things to see from the window of an aircraft. Now, do you still look?
I do. That's why I was going to ask, because like, and I'm not trying to put myself as like, I'm an eternally curious human being or something. But like, where was I flying from? I think I was flying back. I took a trip to the Bahamas earlier this year. But yeah, I was on the way back, and especially at night, I like looking out over cities at night. It just looks like a circuit board to me. And it just kind of, I don't know, I get a little philosophical about humanity as being like a giant computer or something, but even like some of the warehouses and buildings have got like the lights like all around it, and it just looks like the connectors on a transistor or something. Like we're all just transistors in this anyway. But my point is, like, I was flying and I just couldn't stop looking at it, and I'm looking around and everybody else is on their phone or whatever, and I was just kind of like, how are you not looking at this? And I started thinking about, like, I don't fly a lot. I've been flying more, in the last maybe 5 years than I did before, but I've flown enough times that it's kind of like you would think I would get used to it, but I don't. It's just a different perspective. And I think it shouldn't be taken for granted. I mean, it's a freaking miracle. You're flying through the air,
What amazes me about flying at night and looking at cities is that is human civilization. We have an amazing civilization. You see these interconnected cities, towns, just flying over Illinois or something like that, and they're all lit up, and it's like, good Lord, this civilization, didn't look like this 100 years ago. And it's just amazing to see, because it is a technological civilization. And chances are somebody else out there, if they're out there, has the same thing, and that aliens have their own city lights, maybe. Presuming they're in the same spectrum of the same visual spectrum.
Oh, true. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, that's when it gets fun talking about aliens, and you just have to be like, you really have to step out of the human perspective to even start contemplating what they might look like. But what I started to say was that, it's so easy these days to get stressed out and down about like the future and humanity and everything. But I feel like, kind of to your point right there, like you look down and you see everything that we've been able to do collectively, and it's like, this is a really precious thing that we've got here. And as far as we know, it's the only one that exists, and it should be cherished and maintained and taken care of.
Well, the scary thing is that if it is the only one, if this is the only place intelligent life ever happened in the universe, number one, that's so statistically unlikely. It's stupid, but we would also be the most important thing the universe ever did. This civilization, so far as we know, is the pinnacle. This is it, until we actually see evidence of another civilization, which haven't yet.
We are the universe lucid dreaming.
And that's terrifying, but comforting at the same time. All right, Joe, we are out of time. Thanks for visiting with us again, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. It's always good talking to you.
Event Horizon and my channel are now available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube memberships. Early ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and sleep-focused content. Sign up now by clicking the links below to your platform of choice.